It is done. At 97% complete, Saints Row is finished. I wanted to 100% it for this critique, but alas, I see no point in grinding challenges for a review. After all, my opinion of the game is fully formed and won't change based on a few more hours of gameplay. Boom, boom, boom. Woo. This is a bit of a hot take, but in my opinion, this is the best Saints Row game to date. Saints Row 2 is still my favorite, but this new installment brings an amazing synthesis of ideas to the table. It's clear that the developers made a conscious decision to attempt to discard any fluff the series had accumulated over the years. What we're left with is pure Saints Row quintessence. The core gameplay of Saints Row has never changed throughout the series. That's why I've never seen it as a GTA clone. You're always running around, shooting, driving, and doing some kind of arbitrary gameplay objective in order to receive a reward. It's always an open world city that slowly gets taken over by the Saints. Saints Row 4 even lampoons this somewhat in some of its more meta sections. This is to say that this reboot is not exactly a reimagining because nothing changes. It's more of a return to form for the franchise than anything else. It proves that the backdrop doesn't affect the gameplay. It doesn't matter if you're fighting gang members, private military groups, aliens, or even Satan himself. Ultimately, all that stands between the player and utter conquest of the map is a list of arbitrary gameplay objectives. At the end of the game, the map will be purple, and the Saints will have won the day. It is inevitable. It is the same in every game. This isn't a strike against it, in my view. Personally, I find this core very enjoyable, so I was glad to see it stripped down and laid bare in a fresh context. That's what this game rebooted. Context. Back on the streets with conventional threats to face. Time travel and divine intervention forgotten. Speaking of divine intervention, spoilers for Gat Out of Hell. In the ending of that game, God is so impressed by Johnny Gat that he wishes to grant him a wish. One of those wishes can be to reboot the world of Saints Row in order to bring the Earth back into being. Wouldn't it be funny if this was just the canon ending, and this is the result of the reset boss inevitably rising to power through sheer murder glory? Anyway, headcanon aside, let's get into the nitty-gritty. So, I almost considered scrapping this review and just talking about the story, because I really don't have anything to say about the gameplay. It's Saints Row gameplay. There's really nothing more to say about it. It isn't bad. It doesn't break new ground. It's just more of the same. They have like active abilities that you can use for fun, but it's not really dangerous. The focus is still on the guns. Car combat feels a bit better, leaning more into the arcadey driving and inter-car combat. You see it the most with motorcycles. Motorcycles are very hard to fall off of, but they have less health than cars, so it's just an enemy type on the road, essentially. That brings it different. GTA takes more like a simulation approach to vehicle combat, where, well, it's just the vehicles have health based on what kind of vehicle it is. They have mass based on that. This feels more like part of the combat is sometimes you're having combat in a car. Getting on the roof of the car is nice. Going from the car to the wingsuit is nice. The wingsuit I found to be more like a fast travel tool than I wasn't using it in gameplay very much. But I really don't have basically anything to say about the gameplay. It's Saints Row gameplay, served up in its purest form. What I really enjoyed was the story and the characters. Now, the characters, they didn't click for some people, but they really clicked for me. I loved the wholesome friend dynamic. I love how the party grows from essentially these weak bystanders who are just kind of going with whatever organization they're associated with. They grow into fully realized moral agents who are taking matters into their own hands and doing things for themselves and each other instead of just serving whatever organization best matches their aesthetics. They're able to overcome that. The loyalty missions for the characters, they're interesting. They had some character development, but the one I want to talk about is Nina's. So the loyalty mission for Nina has you, well, the second one has you attempting to buy art. And the first time, the owner refuses to sell, but she doesn't even like the art. She wants to own it out of spite. And the boss suggests, why don't we just take it? And Nina's hesitant. She wanted to pay for it, to own it. But she ultimately concludes that the sculpture deserves to be held by someone who appreciates it. But every time this happens in the mission, it's a situation where stealing the statue is more justified than the last time. And it eventually gets to the point where Nina is just too exhausted to even keep up the pretense of trying to buy it anymore. I just really enjoyed that mission. This is a funny concept of every time it gets more justified to just take it until you just took all of them. But really, the story. I very much enjoyed the story. I think it was smartly written. Essentially, the game has two stories that are running parallel to each other. The first story is the story of the Saints and their rise to power. That story is progressed by completing the criminal ventures, taking over the map. The second story is the story of the Nawali, which that one's progressed by completing main missions. That's about as far as we get without spoilers, so proceed with caution if you care about that sort of thing. When I first started the game, the opening scene seemed pointless to me. In fact, I wrote it in my notes as a negative thing. I wanted to start the story from the beginning, and this opening scene felt like it was giving me too much information. Once I had finished the game, though, I understood why it had to exist. The guy who showed up with the briefcase is a red herring. He shows up in the story a lot, and it seems like he might be important, but he never does anything of consequence. When I was going through the game, I thought the Nawali was the red herring. I mean, it was just so obvious that he would betray you that I didn't think they would actually do it, but they did. So that's why I say the second story is the story of the Nawali. We start with the boss preventing his escape from Marshall to earn a performance bonus. Then the boss breaks him out of prison, and the group decides to try to bring him into the fold. They accept him without judgment and extend the promise of trust to him. This legitimately drives him to madness. This is where I think we get into the moral of the story. That's right. I believe the story of a Saints Row game has a moral. It all made sense with the Nawali's betrayal. Before his betrayal, he could have been a decent person, just like the boss. There are many similarities between them. They both kill without remorse and lack empathy. For lack of a better word, they're both sociopaths. But that's where the similarities end. The boss is a good sociopath, and the Nawali is a bad one. That's right. The boss kills without remorse, but also without illusions. For the boss, that is simply the nature of conflict. When people do battle, the greater warrior wins. Strip that away, and the boss is a compassionate soul who would kill and die for their friends and their beliefs. The Nawali, on the other hand, simply accepts himself as nothing more than a killer, and that's all he can allow himself to be. When the Saints offer him true friendship with no strings attached, it flies in the face of the world he has come to accept. The Nawali lives in a world of pain and death, where trust is for fools, and the survivors are the ones who kill and betray without hesitation. The boss lives in a world of contradiction and whimsy, where killing is simply a skill and nothing more. In that world, the choice is simple. Do what you're going to do anyway, and kill anyone who gets in your way. Ultimately, the boss just wants to live in peace, yet exists in a world of conflict, where all structure and hierarchy is corrupt. It's the difference between killing to live and living to kill. The Nawali can't accept a peace won by a team. He needs to control every aspect of his world. The boss doesn't want or need control because the boss simply overcomes any new circumstances that arise. Taking over the city is almost incidental, merely an alternative to working as a wage slave. That brings us back to the first story, the story of the Saints. I like that these stories are separated, as it makes the open world takeover content more engaging and meaningful than previous games. This is the story that shows that the boss simply wants to live and thrive in this wacky world. Starting businesses and putting in the work to make them as good as they can be is a satisfying story to play out. The culmination of this is the building of Saints Tower. After completing this, you get what I'm going to call the true ending. The group sings Love Shack in a hilarious and heartwarming music video. This is so perfect an ending to the game for a couple reasons. First of all, karaoke was the thing that Eli wanted to do in the team building mission, but they decided to reschedule it. And secondly, the Nwali specifically didn't want to sing Love Shack. It shows the bond of trust and friendship between these characters, transcending the grid of the world and weathering their betrayal with mutual trust. The Saints have actually made the world a better place by doing what they've done. And that's why I gotta say, I like this game.